Good morning. This is Thursday, March 25th, and we're finishing up chapter 9 here. So I left off last time with some of the aspects of suicidal activities, not generally truly completed suicides, but suicidal actions and self-mutilating and things like that. So let's finish this thing out. Here's a rhetorical question. Which teens get into the most serious trouble as adolescents? And what we learn from that, of course, is those teens who have a more mature frontal cortex and their executive functions, the ones that weigh things out, the part of the brain that considers the future consequences of your behavior, since we know adolescents are risk takers as well, they seem to do the best. And then lo and behold, attachment comes in. Those who don't have secure attachment are the most likely to get in trouble. If you have secure attachment, then of course you have good relationships with your parents, and you don't feel bad about yourself, and a lot of things. So here's yet another example of where attachment theory can help us understand how people act at this particular age. Questions: which teens flourish, which means which teens really do well and have great growth spurts and learn a lot. Teenagers thrive when they have superior executive functions. Well, yeah, just like adults. So no big surprise there. Developmentalists make a distinction between adolescence limited turmoil and life course difficulties. Perhaps you had a friend who used to stay out all night and partying and taking drugs, but later became a responsible parent. Or you may just know somebody who was a troubled teen and they sort of grow out of it. That's that issue that I believe I talked about, that we as child psychologists we're not allowed to call adolescents psychopaths, and because there's a chance they can grow out of it. True psychopaths do not grow out of psychopathy. Once a psychopath, always a psychopath. But there are adolescents who certainly mimic psychopathy, and we call them conduct disorder. Are you wanting to be on TV here? Where are you? Pat is talking to me for some reason. I don't know. Maybe she's an adolescent. There's some good questions on this table 9.6. Question: how does the brain change during adolescence? Answer: dramatically, in different ways. The front lobe gray matter, remember gray matter is different than white matter. White matter is connective tissue. Gray matter is everything else. So all your memory and all your processing is all done by gray matter. And the reason they call it gray matter and the reason they call it white matter is because if you crack open somebody's brain, that is the color that it actually is. Frontal lobe gray matter, the neurons and the synapses, peaks right before puberty and then gradually declines due to pruning. So I might have mentioned this to you before. When you're a parent and everybody tells you, abuela and all that, when your kids are first born, stimulate the hell out of them. Get them mobiles that you hang from your bedside so they can lay in bed and watch all these things spinning around and making noise, little animals, colors, all these things, and then introduce them to a lot of things in the world. They're going to be like a sponge sucking that stuff up anyway. But what a lot of people, and grandmothers included, forget to tell you, hey, guess what? When the synaptic pruning process begins in 11, 12 years old, that kind of age, you need to reintroduce your child to all these different environmental experiences again, because the synaptic pruning's occurring. And as we know about synaptic pathways, you either use them or lose them. So you will have things cut away that if they haven't been stimulated in a while. So reintroduce them to the kids museum or the art museum. Make sure they're listening to more than one type of music. If you are going to teach them another language, or if they already know two languages, then make sure they're getting some discussion in both languages so they don't lose those skills. Imagination, things like writing and drawing or sculpting or any of those skills. Music is a big one. If you want your child to be introduced to an instrument, now's the time to do it. And even if they don't become skilled with it, they don't learn how to play the piano. If you just send them to piano lessons or violin or some other instrument, that will maintain that neural pathway and can be drawn upon in the future, because we know this how brains work, that if you are good in music or art, even if you're not good, if you're just exposed to it, if you practice it and maybe you suck at playing the flute, those skills are going to carry on past this neural pruning and help you, assist you in your academic skills when you need them in college and graduate school. So I think I probably mentioned my first love of my life back in high school and lasted all the way through the end of college. And then when she graduated and got into medical school, adios, güerito. So that was the end of me. But she spoke two languages proficiently. She happened to be an Air Force dependent, and her dad was stationed overseas, so she learned how to speak French. Obviously, she spoke English. She was a talented artist. She taught herself how to play the guitar. She sang very well. These skills helped her in academic settings. Now, she was really smart to begin with, but part of being smart is having those neural pathways connected and working. So something that you would not think helped your academic side, like music, like playing an instrument, it does. It does help you on your academic side. So remember that. Question 2 has to do with differences in genders, males and females, as far as their brains developed. You probably read that, hopefully. And then question 3 is fairly interesting. It says, does the brain imaging findings mirror the behavioral research in this section? Answer, not really. Although teen brains generally mature in ways that I've described, studies that explore differences in specific brain activation patterns of deviant teens versus the more well-adjusted mates have confusing results. Well, I think I posted something in the News You Can Use about the brains of psychopaths. The point is, well, we already talked about the process of attachment, and attachment, secure attachment does change your brain functioning. Now, can you see that on an MRI? Maybe, but you have to, MRIs are not, I mean, they're pretty sophisticated when you're looking at brain functions, because now you're looking at a functional MRI. A structural MRI is excellent. It doesn't need any explanation. If you know how to look at one, just like you know how to look at an X-ray, you can tell. But a functional MRI can only be about the brain, because what you're looking at is how does the brain act differently when it's doing certain things like talking or playing music or whatever. So it's a science in itself. One of the things that's growing, as I mentioned, the two areas that are most growing in psychology are the biopsychology connection at the cellular level. What is going on in the brain? That's number one. That's tremendous growth area. And that was preceded by a growth area in brain imaging, which is still a very growth growing part of psychology, because there's so many new things that are going on in imaging. So just because she doesn't mention that things are clear, seems pretty clear that there is a physiological and anatomical contribution necessary for a psychopath to be a psychopath. And the issues of our advanced understanding of cellular biology, which does include imaging as well. We're learning more and more about that. So that's the growth fields in psychology. One thing I wanted to mention, which the author did, that the circadian rhythms of your body, you know, when you get up, when you go to bed, all those things, which sometimes daylight savings times affects in a negative way, sometimes the outside environment. Seasonal affective disorder, SAD, seasonal affective disorder. When does that happen? In fall. The weather changes, the lengths of days are different, and people have this reaction to the social side of biopsychosocial, and it usually affects them in not a positive way. So with adolescents, especially high school as adolescents, is what I'm talking about, their circadian rhythm changes, and they have a harder time, literally a harder time getting up out of bed in the morning and getting something productive done. So the school districts that don't realize that, and they make everybody come to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, that's really counterproductive when it comes to juniors and seniors. So I think some schools kind of give these puff classes to high school seniors at that time of the day, because they know their brains are not, well, they should know, their brains are not that alert. The picture in the book here, the guy's got his head on his desk taking a nap, and people always attribute it to, oh, they just stayed up too late last night. Well, no, that's not it. You do need a lot of sleep when you're an adolescent. And a lot of times they don't get it because they're doing their fun things, social networking and all that stuff, playing games on the computer. So some schools have actually realized that, and they don't schedule classes for juniors and seniors until like 10 o'clock or something, or 9 o'clock at least. And that helps. Okay, the author talks about the process of exploring the dance of autonomy. Remember the dance of attachment? And now they're talking about the dance of autonomy. Well, they're not exactly the same things, of course, because autonomy is just, are you being independent of your parents? You can obviously be securely attached, and that doesn't mean that you don't want some autonomous separation between, if you're an adolescent, between you and your parents. You can be on good relations with them, but you still need to have some distance between you and them, because you're growing into a young adult, and your parents will always be your parents, and they'll hopefully always be in your life, but you need to stand up on your own 2 feet. So that's one of the conflicts of storm and stress that Stanley Hall talked about. Then she talks a couple pages here of groups, good groups, bad groups, and you don't need a big explanation of that. If you are depending on your peer groups for your concept of self-esteem, which you are, then groups have a lot of power in your life, and they're good. The groups can be good groups. If any of you are religious people, you will find that most churches have a very aggressive youth ministry program, because people who think alike in their religious beliefs can get together with other kids that are their age and do fun things, and look at some of that altruism that occurs among adolescents and young people, even your age. A lot of altruistic behavior, which you may remember that word, means that you do things on behalf of other people. I don't know much about other religions than Christianity, but Christianity tells us to do these things, and we have an obligation, because we're children of God, to help others, and people take that serious. So you might as well plant those seeds pretty well in adolescence, so that when you become adults, you continue with that need to help others, and be a good steward of your religious beliefs, so that you would be a good example for somebody who is any division of Christianity, whether it's Catholic or non-Catholic, Baptist, Lutheran, Episcopalian, whatever. So, all right, that's all to the text. Now, I don't have anybody checked in. I was a little late getting on this morning, so maybe you guys gave up on me. I don't know. Sorry, some things do interrupt my teaching life here. Okay, let's take a look at some questions. It might be of interest. Number 6, good question. Adolescence, the answer is B, is a result of people who lived in the 20th century developed world. That's how we got into adolescence. We talked about that when we went from an agrarian society to an industrial society in the early 1900s. And that's when adolescents got created as a specified group, and eventually we made them mandated that they go to high school and all those kind of things. Here's a very simple thought, but a good one. Number 7, which of the following is a property of formal operational thought? This is beyond concrete thinking, right? The answer is B, thinking abstractly. That's why you get into so much of those conflicts when kids are 11 and 12, the middle school ages, which I told you, if you're going to be a teacher, strap on the seatbelt in that age. But the ability to abstract think is, of course, part of your prefrontal cortex during your executive function, because you have to look at your behavior and what are the logical consequences of your behavior when you're doing risk taking. So it's good that you have formal operational thought abilities, because you're going to need them. Number 8, a core change unique to formal operation is that teens can see reasonably abstractly about hypothetical possibilities. So that's just a different explanation, number 8, and the answer is C. You'll have a couple of these on the test for sure, because it's you got 8 or 10 questions on that, so you know 2 or 3 of them will be on the test. Lawrence Kohlberg, if you watch the Heinz dilemma, then you got Kohlberg's idea. I think I posted also a hard copy of his theory and its explanation in a diagram that's in the handout section of your drop-down menu. There'll certainly be some Kohlberg questions on it, and pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional. Those are the 3 sections that Kohlberg came up with, and you can expect several questions on the test about that. We've got all sorts of, well, we've got about 3 pages of questions on Kohlberg's idea. Elkind's idea about adolescence and the concept that you're always on stage and the spotlight's on you, and these are all true. You'll see some Elkind's questions on the exam. Common sense things. A lot of this stuff is common sense. You're not that far out of adolescence that you can't remember, you know, that your peers were very important to you and your appearance was very important to you. Here's a distressing one. Question 48. The age group that a judge most likely would see in her court are males in their B, late teens and early 20s. You know, prefrontal cortex is not, still under construction, not completed. The risk taking is still there, the lack of thinking things out and consequences, and the fact that you're now old enough to drive, old enough to drink legally. It's a dangerous combination because, as I told you, your brain does not fully get sort of all the neural pathways connected and synapses connected until you're about 28 or 29. So in the beginning of your 20s, you're still got a ways to go. So, and this is the same phenomenon about why juvenile delinquents seem to age out. They just stop raging against the machine and raging against the man when they're 18 or 19 and they're not living at home and they got their own job and money and they got responsibilities and they start learning very quickly how that works. And maybe they get married, or maybe they just have a child and they're not married, but because we know from the lifestyle of emerging adulthood, most of the stuff that used to happen 18 to 20 to 21 or 2 is being pushed up, 10 years or 8 years, so that people are putting off marriage until later in their 20s and making decisions and their lives. We'll talk about that next chapter, that a lot of life changes occur in your adolescence because you're making decisions about sexuality, about sexual preference, your gender, and life decisions about it. Am I going to go to work? Am I going to go to school? Am I going to have to do both? If I go to school, what am I going to study? What do I intend to do? All those kinds of things. All right. Well, without you here to ask questions, I don't know what your questions are. So if you still have questions, uh, we'll be meeting tomorrow at same time, 10 o'clock. And you can ask any questions that you want then, or you can text me questions and I'll answer them that way. So, all right, see you well, hopefully see you tomorrow. And the test will be released tomorrow. And as always, you have until Sunday night to complete that. Some of you still are missing tests and I haven't heard from you. So, I mean, maybe you're not watching these videos and you don't know what you're supposed to do, but come on, even in face-to-face classes, if you miss a test, you're going to have to do something about it. So you ask your instructor, can I make up that test that I missed? Many of them won't let you do that. Well, I will, but it doesn't do you any good if you don't make it happen. It's you that has to make it happen. I'm opening the door, you have to walk through it. So hopefully you'll see the reality of that. All right, as always, shoot me an email. You know by now, I am very good at answering them promptly if you send them to daneildoc@gmail.com. Now, if you're silly and send it to the EPCC EDU one, well, that your answer is not going to be as quick, but I'll eventually get around to looking at it. Okay, take care, be safe. Hopefully see some of you tomorrow.